Hey everybody, and welcome to the first Project Makes video. I know that everyone was really interested in seeing these rainbow bloom coasters and how I did them, so we're going to go through the process today and hopefully recreate something that looks a little bit like this. So here we go. Right, so I've already mixed up my resin and popped 30ml in this little pot here, which we'll just pop to the side for later. So the resin that I'm using today is Craft Resin, which I picked up from Amazon. It's a 1-to-1 mixed resin. I've never really had any issues with it. It's worked really well for my blooms in the past, and it's heat resistant up to 95 degrees as well. So before pouring into the molds, I let it sit for about 10 minutes. You don't want to fill the molds up to the top. We need to have some room because obviously we're going to be adding the alcohol inks, and then we also need to add some pigment for the blooms. So I'm just filling up so that there is a little bit of a gap, but not too much, as we don't want the coasters to be too narrow. So we're now going to mix up the white into the 30ml pot that we put by earlier. I'm using an opaque pigment paste, because I find that it's the best one. I've tried with liquid pigment and I haven't been that successful, and I've also tried with transparent pigment, and again I wasn't that successful, but by all means try it, see if it works for you. It could just be me. So you really don't want a lot of this. You want to scrape off as much as possible because we do want it to be a very light white. White pigment can be quite heavy, and if it's too heavy, that's when you'll get the blobs on the underside or like the bottom of the mold, which can look absolutely stunning. But for this technique, we're trying to avoid that. We want the colours to merge together rather than the white to pool at the bottom. You also need to make sure that before you even think about pouring the white, that it's quite warm. So I'm leaving this for about 20 minutes just to sit. It does depend on the temperature of your room. So I'm in a converted garage, which at the moment was sitting at about 18 degrees. If you're inside in a room that's heated to 24 degrees, you probably don't want to wait for 20 minutes, but it is something that you're going to have to try and see what works for you. I tend to pop my finger in the resin to see if I can feel through my gloves how warm it's got, and that's kind of my thermometer when it comes to figuring that out. You want it to be a bit warm, you want it to be a bit thicker, because otherwise it's all going to sink to the bottom and you won't get that really pretty bloom effect. So our white's starting to warm up a bit. It's looking nice and thick, which is really good. So it's a good time to start preparing to drop our alcohol inks in. So the alcohol inks that I use are just from Amazon. They come in a box of 24 or 25. I just open them up and pop them in front of me so that I've got easy access to them and keep the lids off. And then you want to start dropping them into your resin. So I'm just going to start by dropping 1 drop of alcohol ink for each colour around the edge of the mould. You want to leave a good space in between each colour because we are going to be adding more. I tend to use between 7 and 8 drops. It just depends on how much spread there is with each drop. So once we've got all of our inks in, you can see that we've got quite a nice spread of ink across the entire outside of the mould. Some people like to give it a swirl into the middle. I felt like giving it a bit of a squiggle today, just to see what it would look like and how different it would be from the first set that I did. Now comes the fun part. So you want to start in the middle and create a very thin swirl from the middle all the way out to the edge of the coaster. Try and make sure that you don't drop the resin too hard or too much of it, because again, that's where we'll get the big lumps and blobs on the bottom or the top of the coaster. So you want to be quite careful with it. Just take your time and don't worry if it wiggles or it doesn't look quite right on one side, mine are never symmetrical on both sides. You just want to make sure that you get that nice thin swirl starting from the middle. And now we're going to do exactly the same thing, but starting from the edge of the mould. So you want to go all the way around the edge and then all the way into the middle, and I just give it a little extra swirl in the middle. So I'm now going to take my silicone tipped tool and I'm going to start pulling from the edge of the mould in between each of the colours into the middle. You want to make sure that you're not touching the bottom of your mould, as this will push the white down, which will create those little blobs that we were talking about earlier. Once you've pulled all your petals down into the middle, I then start from the middle and go back out to the edge of the mould in between each of the petals that I've just created. And then once we've done that, we can just go straight back into the middle and give it a little swirly woo. And that's it. We are ready to let it cure, and hopefully soon we will start to see the petals blooming. I hope this was helpful for you. So this is the rainbow coasters after about an hour and a half. You can already see we're starting to get some blooms, which is really exciting. Obviously the alcohol ink shrinks in a little bit as the blooms start to move, but this is looking really, really positive. So hopefully tomorrow we'll be able to see what they look like.